Welcome, everyone. I see that it is 12 o'clock, so I want to launch today's presentation. My name is Susan Walsh. I'm an educator and a mom of 2 boys and a member of the Lunch and Learn Committee for Catch. It's my pleasure to moderate today's Lunch and Learn, Social and Friend Drama, How to Support Your Child. We are thrilled to welcome our guest, Kate Stewart, who's a licensed clinical professional counselor with affiliates in counseling. Our format will be an hour long. The first half of our time will be Kate sharing useful information and strategies to help support our kids when social drama arises. In the second half, Kate will answer questions from the audience. With that, I'd like to welcome Kate Stewart. Hi, Kate.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen too before I introduce myself. All right. Yes, thanks so much, everybody. Kate Stewart. I am a therapist here on the North Shore. I just recently moved to private practice full time at an office in Northbrook. And prior to working in private practice full time, I was actually a therapist at a private therapeutic day school on the North Shore. And I just mentioned that because very relevant to this topic that I think is a timeless and ever needed topic to talk about. I would say the majority of my mental health work at the school was navigating conflict among adolescents and peers and countless peer mediations all day long. And, really just trying to normalize and empower students who could, figure this out with best friends and, just really trying to give concrete tools to kids that hoping I can give to parents and families today. So again, we're going to be focusing on social and friend drama. We could sit here probably all day and brainstorm why this is more prevalent than ever, whether that's from social media or potential social gaps from the pandemic. Also sometimes is community based, right? So I think I would be remiss if I didn't insert one Mean Girls movie reference during this presentation for those who have seen it or know. And I mentioned that because I think even, our North Shore community has gotten some even Hollywood level attention for just the kind of adolescent and teen drama that can reside in our community. So today I'm hoping that, with some tangible ideas and conversation, that's sort of a narrative we can actually help change around our community, and just really try to help, again, a younger generation be empowered to not be afraid of conflict, to know what to do when it arises, and to just feel more resilient across the board. So our goals for today are going to be to just first and foremost break down what social drama can even look like. As I was preparing my thoughts for this presentation, I think I was even humbly reminded how complex and nuanced drama can be. So want to go through like the what, the why, and the how, this often looks. And then I'm going to go into, again, I think the bulk of this hoping to be giving permission to parents to step back as much as they can, which again is going to really instill that empowerment and those social problem solving skills for your kids. I think this is really important to remember just because, we're not going to be able to prevent conflict. Certainly can't always be there to protect your kids no matter how much you want to be. And I think the most we can do is just support and empower them again. And then I will touch on 2 times where drama can cross over into bullying, right? And the times where parents should step in and just some options of how that can look. One more note I just wanted to bring up too was, this idea that I think drama and bullying doesn't sort of like begin and end with the school bells. It's not really just a school isolated issue. I really want to think about this as a community issue, right? So how this starts in our home and conversations and in parent modeling, so that again, we're kind of just creating the area and community that we really want to be a part of that feels healthy. All right. So to start, I thought it would be really important to kind of differentiate some of this language around conflict, drama, and bullying. Even wanted to intentionally help you see it and visualize it as like what could be small, medium, and large almost in terms of scaffolding. So this slide is sort of here to represent that, not all conflict and drama can be considered bullying, but bullying is definitely always a form of intense conflict and drama. And I'm going to come back to this concept later in the presentation to talk about just why helping our kids, even with the language around these definitions, can help them feel empowered on how to go about problem solving as well. All right, to break this down a little bit further, I wanted to just put some subcategories of how, drama can look. And I understand that the word aggression can seem intense, right? But the idea that a lot of these really can sort of morph, right? And overlap just depending on what kind of conflict is happening. And also really want to point out that not all of these things are really obvious, right? Sometimes this could be sort of interactions that are happening on like a very, quiet level, passive level. So these can be both covert and overt kind of interactions that are happening. So there's physical aggression, verbal aggression. Today, I'm going to try to talk a lot about like the relational aggression, where, it's kind of this concept of just something that's happening interpersonally, or it could even be, manipulative or damaging to someone's relationships with other people. Um, and then all of this in the world we live in, of course, intersects with what's happening on technology and social media. So that's where the cyber aggression piece comes in. Again, anything that's happening on the online setting, name calling, trolling, teasing, that kind of thing. For any parents that aren't as familiar with what trolling means, I also just wanted to put out there that that's really anytime there's like online commentary or almost even like baiting, which people can engage in to sort of even intentionally provoke an argument or an emotional reaction. So, this might have happened already with some of your kids, right? Where it's just people kind of seeking online drama and entertainment. And that's where it becomes really helpful to teach our kids how to look out for these and not give that reaction, be able to sort of check in with themselves before even responding. Really quickly too, I just wanted to put out there that when we think about interpersonal conflict, there's this idea that this could stem from something that's a little more reactive. So, this is driven by emotions, or at times can be impulsive too. So this is where, maybe your child has felt hurt or wronged or needing to defend themselves, right? So that's where I think maybe in addition to the conflict might come up. And then there is a different kind of aggression too called instrumental aggression. This can be more planned, where there's more of a motive to gain something like social status or power again, or sometimes for entertainment if a child's bored at school. And these are in the Venn diagram here just to show that, of course, they can overlap on many occasions. Okay, so some of the other examples of how social drama looks and might be showing up in your child's life. First and foremost, I want to talk about social exclusion. Um, there's actually a research lab at the University of Missouri. It's like the bully prevention lab. But they just did a recent study in 2022 that was figuring out that social exclusion is actually the most common form of bullying at this point in time. So social exclusion could be, just kind of being isolated on purpose, or rumors or gossip that has sort of lent itself to someone being excluded. Um, I won't read all of these, but on that topic of gossip, I just want to point out gossip is often information, right, about someone's personal lives that's being shared with other people. And rumor can be information, that's passed from one person to another person that's not even true necessarily. Um, give you guys another second to look at those. And then want to spend a second on why all the drama, right? This, of course, is happening earlier and earlier, even in elementary school, but certainly when we get to the adolescent age, this is pretty prevalent. And just want to talk about, where even the human nature comes into this, or our wiring. So when we think about even like survival tactics from thousands of years ago, or when we look at mammals, right? It's sort of like if you didn't have a peer group, or if you didn't belong, you were pretty much good as toast, right? So connecting with a peer group can feel literally like a need for survival. Um, Additionally, that first bullet point's talking about social comparison, which we can also frame as, a survival tactic, where if we compare ourselves, we're often able to look towards other people to learn skills we might need. Long time ago, maybe that was hunting and gathering, which not so much anymore, but it's, evaluating what we have to offer, where we fit into the world. So a lot of this is really adaptive. Could also spend a lot of time thinking about why kids and teenagers get wrapped up in drama, and that can almost be its own separate presentation. But for when it helps parents kind of slow down and empathize with why this might all be happening, or if their child is contributing to, it could be anything from the desire to fit in, to peer pressure. Sometimes it's seeking control or a sense of power. Um, Sometimes it's, again, kind of valuing that thrill or entertainment, maybe in a way over that empathy kind of skill that doesn't feel as important in that moment. I think another really common one is when kids are maybe projecting their own feelings, right? Or low self-esteem onto other people. This is actually the one slide that you're going to see show up twice today. And I did that intentionally just from my biased therapist view, but I also really wanted to help guide parents to, sharpen their intuition that I think is really already there, and help to know what to look out for in their kids. Because if you're sensing, there might be some conflict or drama that your child's navigating, even when they're not talking about it necessarily to you, or later this is going to show up again when we talk about times where it's really important to step in and intervene, right? And you might want to get some additional support, but these are some of the major signs to look out for in your child that might show that, the conflict is weighing on them in a really significant way. So your kid almost better than anybody, right? So anything that you would deem as noticeably different from behavior prior, or sort of unexplained changes, um, anxiety, depression, isolating, definitely the way they interact with their school world, right? If you're seeing a decline in academic performance, or your spidey senses are going up about the school avoidance piece, having a harder time getting out the door. It's really easy for kids and teens to sometimes fall back on the psychosomatic complaints, right? Like headaches and stomach aches. And sometimes they really are experiencing those too, right? When this is really weighing on them. So hopefully this serves as a good guide for parents to just keep their eye out. Okay. So earlier when I kind of helped break it down between conflict, drama, and bullying, and I had mentioned that like the language and differentiation between those is really important. Um, Want to just again completely validate that nuances in social conflict are really complex, really, really complex. And I think that's, how your kids are experiencing it too, when it's just, they're knee deep in it and aren't sure even what the next step can be. But I think it's really important to get clear about these words we use, just to make sure we're not misusing any of the language with our kids or overusing it. Also, definitely don't want to minimize or invalidate something that could be a bigger problem. Um, Also just wanting to get a sense of how your child uses this language, right? So a lot of surveys talk about how teens are not going to just come out and straight up say they're being bullied to their parents. Or unfortunately, there are times too where that's the word they jump to, quicker than others might, when they're perceiving being, attacked a lot. But, teens might be trying to bring things up to you in a more subtle way. And it's really important to look for, how they're trying to engage you in that conversation. Probably not going to sit down and say, Mom, I was bullied at school today and I really want to talk about it. Um, Almost if there's anything I want you guys to take away from today, I think that we all need to remember is just like reframing that conflict can be really healthy, right? It's really normal. This is how people grow. This is how they learn resiliency. Um, Even the little definition over there about what growth can even look like. So, this can be an attitude that you adopt, I think, when you're kind of getting pulled into really wanting to fix everything for your kids, right? Or just try to make sure they're okay at every moment. We want them to have tools to navigate conflict. Um, Also wanted to talk about, social media gets I think, really demonized look at it for how much time people and kids are spending on it. But there are also positive impacts of social media and identity. So I was reading this one survey that I didn't put in here, but it was talking about how teenagers were, talking about it's a really creative outlet. It helps them feel connected to teens all over the country, get help if they need it too, even online. Um, but definitely also being able to contribute to relevant conversations with peers at school, right, is a huge positive outcome that can come from being engaged in the social media world. All right. So want to dive more into what can parents do? How does this look at home? How does this start in the conversations, that you're having with your kids on a daily basis? Um, and I really want parents to feel great and hopefully secure, knowing that a lot of the coaching your kids on how to handle this social conflict is already naturally happening at home in everyday life with the behavior you model. And if anything, if this hour is a good time to even just pause and reflect on how that's showing up in your home, or something you want to move forward being a little bit more intentional about, then that's amazing too. But parents really can lead by example, right, of how they manage conflict in their own lives, how they regulate themselves, especially before having a conversation with their kids, um, taking breaks, thinking before you speak. Um, and I think promoting self reflection is a huge one, right? So, this is where parents can kind of slow down and apologize if, there was maybe moment they made a choice that they didn't love, or, showing what it looks like to kind of reflect and step back and talk to their kids about how they could have navigated something differently. Um, this idea of self-reflection is also really important when it comes to understanding your child's behavior. So, when protection mode happens, I think it's really normal to be looking at the behavior of all the other kids and peers, right? But it's really healthy to be able to slow down and look at maybe your child's role in their behavior, or their patterns of interaction, right? That you might want to just help them be able to see a little clearer so that they can handle situations in the future too. One of the big concepts too that's going to come up on the next couple slides is this idea again of, we don't want to just fight their battles. We don't want to step in and fix and problem solve right away. You're there to be a coach. You're there to guide them, to implant some ideas and seeds of what they could do, right? But we want them to feel like they're on the front lines of being able to figure this out for themselves. Okay. I think um, even figuring out how to get that door open for communication and understanding with your kids is sometimes the trickiest part. Whether that's as they're getting older, or maybe there's been moments that something's been tried to be communicated and they didn't necessarily perceive it as feeling understood or supported in the way they needed. So now you're kind of back to square one trying to figure this out again. But a lot of the things that I put on this slide actually came out of family sessions I've run that, have felt the most successful in hindsight, or direct feedback from kids and teens I've worked with about what they feel like they need from their parents in their own words. Um, so number one here, I think I've touched on this, right? But really being able to slow down and check in with yourself as the parent before you have a conversation or want to bring something up to your child. So you could ask yourself things like, what feelings are coming up for me right now as the parent? How can I regulate first to make sure that I'm going to be a healthy role model in this conversation? Um, Also, the idea of giving them power over their needs, that could look something like, if a conversation's open and it's about to take place, you can ask your child or teenager, like, hey, what do you think you need from me right now? Do you want me to just listen? Are you looking for some advice? Right? Giving them a little bit of control over what that conversation can look like. And not all kids are going to be able to tell you what they need or necessarily like that question. So by default, and almost in any scenario, I think it's the safe bet to say the listening role, right? And not jumping to the advice giving is going to be the most productive and perceived by your child as the most validating. Um, Want to talk a little bit too about that last point there, honoring their experience. So to me, that just means there's a time and place where sharing your own experiences, right? Or a story about kind of friendship challenges that you've navigated on your own, those can be really helpful for normalizing this, right? Or bonding with your child. But I don't know that that should always be the number one go-to strategy, because sometimes kids can feel like if we're, just imposing our own experiences, it might be taking away from what they're trying to share in the moment about their own experience. Um, Perfect. So this is again more on that notion of why it is so important and okay and healthy as a parent to step back in any chance that you can. We really want to raise independent thinkers. We want to raise kids that aren't going to be afraid to fail, right? So it is such the natural reaction to want to step in and protect your kid. But if we can reframe that as, might this be unintentionally disempowering my child in this moment? Um, Two other points I wanted to put out there was, it's not always great to just pick up the phone or reach out and try to contact another parent. There's a lot of times where, again, that actually could make things worse or make it more complicated. Um, and it can be really important to point out behavior to your kids that you're maybe seeing that you don't necessarily think is a good value or healthy in other children, but you do not want to talk about, you know, their friends, I think specifically. So this is just really trying to avoid criticizing any of their friends that might get, your child feeling a little bit defensive or maybe even feeling the need to be more loyal to those friends. And this is a really good way, again, to teach empathy too, that you're not going to be the kind of parent that, is kind of talking poorly about other people or families behind their back, and really trying to help your child slow down and say, if this unkind behavior was targeted at me today, what could have been going on with that other person in that moment? Or that could be an anomaly, right? For that other child, just sort of having a bad day or making a mistake too. It doesn't mean, we write off that child as a potential friend or somebody they could get along with. Okay, so this is the social problem solving model that I'm hoping can be a tangible tool that you could even walk your kids through. This is something we used at the school I was working at a lot, almost on a daily basis, just to kind of like slow down and evaluate, like, what are some of my options here on how I can proceed and what's going to get me the outcome that's going to feel the best in the moment. But I also want parents to be able to use this from their own lens in decision making, sort of that parallel process, if that makes sense. So if I were a parent and wanting to sort of conceptualize, how do I help my child? What do I do in this very particular situation that's happening? Step one would be like gathering information in context and trying not to jump to conclusions or making any assumptions about what's happening. Number two, again, is back to that slide about conflict, drama, bullying, really trying to assess, like, how big is this problem? And, if it's sort of small or medium, that's most likely a time where you'd want your child to attempt resolving it on their own, or you from the outskirts giving them some ideas on how to resolve it. But then, certainly if it's landing as something that's a larger problem or even medium large, that's when parents would need to step in or get some additional insight on what to do next. Just one other thing I want to point out on here, number three, asking yourself as a parent, like, what's my goal here? Like, what do I want the teachable moment for my child to be? Is this something where my goal could also be to be a better listener? Because that's just something I've noticed that I might tend to jump in more to give advice, right? So my goal for today, navigating this with my child, is going to be to just practice stepping back and be a better listener. And sometimes when that's intentional, top of mind for parents too, right? Sort of looking at this, it can just help you leave that conversation feeling good about how you navigated it. Okay, so some of the major ideas for parents about how you can be your child's coach, right? Not problem solver. These are things that maybe are sort of intertwined in everyday conversation at home, or these are things that, when the door is open and you sense that your child is, looking to you for some advice or support, these are things that you can kind of bring up in the conversation. But first and foremost, always, even if this gets repetitive, is being empathetic, right? So we want to teach kids that any emotions, all emotions, like even big emotions, are really okay. And we want to validate that. I think kids are going to experience and internalize conflict completely differently just based on who they are by nature, right? And they might be very different from how we were as kids and just wanting to be there to empathize that this feels really big when they're in the middle of it. Um, Number two, asking open questions, right? So instead of rushing to sort of solve the problem or tell them the best solution, this is sort of a step back about how you could just ask them instead, like, oh, I don't know, what do you think? Or I've sort of noticed this when, you get home from hanging out with this particular friend. Like, what do you think that means about the friendship? So again, it's just more open, not assuming, giving your child that space to sort of think about it and maybe come to a conclusion on their own. Um, I like the idea of process praise because this, whether it's anything, but especially them navigating friendships, it's sort of that idea that you want to focus on complimenting them when you see them use any sort of strategy or even make like a baby step of progress towards problem solving something on their own or putting in effort to step out of their comfort zone and try something new socially with friends, right? So this is again that idea of empowerment in the sense of they're trying, right? Any baby step is what we just want to facilitate as, the best way for them to be making larger changes. Um, Couple quick ideas too. When I say intentionally modeled conversations, we know there's going to be times where it feels like your child is just not listening to the direct conversation you are trying to have. But sometimes those side door approaches, you might catch them in a more observant and just sort of learning from your actions kind of role. So this could be thinking about, whether you have a partner or a spouse or a friend that might come over often or you talk to on the phone. How can you sort of set up conversations to maybe have your child know that they could listen to that, right? So something that came up with you and a friend or you and a coworker and just how you navigated that. That takes a little pre-planning, but again is sometimes really effective when you're noticing just those direct conversations don't seem to be open at the time being with your child. Be a self-care household. I think that's just really important to teach our kids on a daily basis to sort of ask themselves, like, what do I need emotionally today? Right? Like, what does my heart and soul need today? And self care is not, things that cost money or beauty routines or anything of that regard. Again, it's just teaching them to figure out anything that makes them feel good on an emotional level and almost trying to prioritize this as being as important as chores or homework, right? Because this is going to really come into play if your child is having a particularly hard time emotionally with friends. Some other tangible ideas that I hope are helpful to parents. If if they bring up a scenario where they do want your help, right? And they are needing some brainstorming on where to go next with a peer or a classmate. These are some ideas you can throw out there to them, excuse me, and then be able to ask which one sounds best for you, right? Or let's use that social problem solving model and here's some of our options. Which ones do you think is going to give the outcome that you're looking for, right? So this can be anything from um, pausing before they react, right? Remembering that they don't even really have to give a response in that moment and have time to think about it. Um, Teaching your child what it looks like to give a really healthy apology, maybe if they were sort of on the dishing outside of a conflict. Right? It's okay to leave a conversation thread if it's really overwhelming or there just seems to be a lot of toxicity happening there. So again, thinking of these as menu options that you can help your child explore, and giving freedom for them to sort of experiment with which ones tend to work in the moment. Um, I think it's always really proactive and preventative to talk to your kids about who can be like a list of safe adults that they trust outside of you as the parent, right? Sometimes it's a extended family member or a teacher or a school counselor, where reminding them it's okay if they don't want to come to you for every situation and advice. You just want to make sure they have support somewhere. Um, I think it's really cool to talk about empowered body language with your kids. So there's like power poses, right, that you can help them practice and role model before they might have a hard conversation with a friend. This is something you again can do by modeling if you have something coming up at work. This might be something you kind of do at home and then tell your kid the motive behind it. I should have practiced one of these before my presentation today, a power pose. Um, and then again, proactively helping your kid create a self-care plan for days where emotions are high, they're feeling sort of lonely and isolated. That could be anything, that could be written down with them, or they have as a list on their phone. Music, a walk, a hot shower, um, playing with the family pet, right? Just sort of normalizing that they have avenues they can go to, even if it's not having a conversation necessarily. All right, nearing the end here. This is that slide that I said was going to come up again. So if any of these signs are becoming more salient, right, or have been happening now for a while, this might be a sign where a parent needs to step in further out of that coaching role. Or we'll talk about, this might mean that, it would be a really good time to explore maybe seeking help from a professional too, just to have somebody else in their corner who can, help support them with some of these things. So when it would be time for a parent to step in and how that would look. Um, really want to normalize that this step can be complicated, right? It depends on exactly what's happening. It depends on who's involved. It depends on what's the history here. So again, I want you to think of this as more of a menu of options that you can sort of peruse through based on any given scenario. So things that you really, really want to take into consideration before figuring out how to step in further or maybe get the school or other adults involved is, what's the context here? Does my child have a role that I'm helping teach them about, or even set limits and consequences on? Or is this a long-standing history between my child and this peer? Sometimes it's friends you've known for a really long time, right? Like family friends since childhood, and that might be an advantage in a situation where you just know the family really well, and it might be a more direct approach to problem solve it with them. Or these might be peers you've really never heard the name of, or are new to the school, or name, sometimes comes up in a way that has your spidey senses up. You also really want to again take into consideration like who the family is. I would say this is not the normal route to go down, right? By involving other families, but it can be really behooving in times where, again, them, or they might be receptive to it, or it's something you can put on their radar just by also showing that, you're willing to help your child reflect on their role in it too. Sometimes I think that feels more palatable to other parents. And then again, when and where the conflict is taking place. So if this is something that is primarily happening at school and you're not, having a good sense of what's happening there, that might be a time to, put something on the school counselor or teacher's radar that you already have some sort of pre-existing relationship with, and just say, this has come up a few times. I'm not really sure the whole story, but, just wanted to put it out there in case this is something that you can kind of support my child and these other children with. the hard line, for me, at least the non-negotiables would be anything that's a heightened safety issue that's coming up, right? So substance abuse, bullying, anytime, that list where your child's mental health is declining. And then definitely if the problem's persisting and you have given your child some freedom to try to resolve this on their own or experiment, they've tried a couple things and now I think it's time to be more direct and deliberate. Um, all right, for the sake of time, I think I've kind of touched on the different options there. Two things that haven't come up as much are, you know, because parents, you're kind of living this every day with your child, and sometimes it's tunnel vision, even finding a friend or an extended family member of yours that you can run this situation past and just say, here's what I'm hearing, here's what's happening. Do you guys have any thoughts on this? Right? Sometimes that just sort of refreshed outsider perspective can lend a lot of insight. There are times where I think you would want to document some of what's happening, right? Keeping screenshots or records. This would be in the larger problems, right? Just to be sure that if something advanced, there could be a way to just have information about that. And then on the last slide here in a minute, I'm going to talk about what sort of the bullying and cyberbullying laws look like in Illinois, but just feeling empowered that as a parent, your school district, your school area always has to have something posted publicly about what their policies are. So just feeling empowered to be able to find that, whether it's on the website or asking and just reviewing what your options are and almost seeing in definition if something, has crossed a line. Okay. So we'll not read all of these. The source is in the corner there, but if anyone is interested, you can go to stopbullying.gov. There's really specific information by state. So in the state of Illinois, again, a lot of this can be chargeable, if something were to get to a really extreme level. And, even just helping parents kind of separate out by definition, what would bullying even mean? Does this qualify? What does cyberbullying even mean? Does this qualify? And then just wanting everyone to remember that just because something maybe didn't happen at school during the school day under, their brick and mortar roof, things that do happen outside of school and electronically really need to be taken seriously and mindful of too, because those would, be included under this umbrella if something got that far. So hoping we have enough time for questions and conversation, but some of the biggest takeaways I want you guys to be able to have, and thank you so much for listening, is again, the lines between all these things can be really blurry. Hopefully this helped you with the language, which can help then your child sort of differentiate what's happening in that language. Just remembering that your empowerment as a parent to show empathy and help them perspective take and understand what might be going on with another classmate or peer, is really powerful. And then even though resiliency and independence is our first and foremost goal, always, of course, there are times where we need to step in, and not just be on the sidelines.
Thank you so much, Kate. Thank you. We've had a lot of questions come through. So this seems like a great place to start. What are some of the best ways to help foster healthy friendships starting as young as preschool and elementary school age children?
Yes, love that. Love that. Love that. And maybe it's perfect that this slide is up too for additional resources if people want it. Because one thought that comes to mind too, especially in younger children, is like, how can you even read books together about these topics, right? I threw some different ones out there just by age, and there's so many good ones if you just Google them, right? But sometimes that's sort of a non-threatening way to sort of start that conversation about normalizing that conflict happens, friendship troubles are going to happen. and just sort of, reading through that together, normalizing it. Another thing that comes to mind, there is this woman, her name is Shasta Nelson, if anyone wants to look her up, but she coins herself as like a friendship researcher, keynote speaker, and I really like how she's defined friendship. And maybe this is something we can help teach our kids from an early age too. She talks about friendship being three-pronged, and anytime one of the three is missing, it's a good sense that that's not the healthiest friendship. And her three prongs are: friendships should be satisfying, right? Positive, somebody you like enjoying mutual time with. Friendships that are safe is the second one. So somebody who's consistent. I think this is a really important message to put out there. And then friendships that are trusting, right? So people you can talk to openly with, and yeah, just be able to be more vulnerable on that level. So I hope
Great.
that helps a little bit.
Yes, absolutely. This is a great question too. It's really understanding when it's developmentally appropriate to know what our kids are capable of. So at what age should we expect them to figure it out versus helping, and how to reconcile those pieces. So this parent is just expressing backing off is sometimes difficult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, 100%. And if I didn't touch on this already, I really want to normalize that your healthiest gut reaction as a parent is going to be to protect them at all costs. I know, Susan, we've talked about like the mama bear thing, right? Your intuition is so healthy and natural. And so that self-reflection piece as a parent, being able to say, it makes sense why I feel this way, right? Why my first pull is going to be to step in and want to fix that. And it's almost like not natural to have to remember I need to step back and help them be empowered.
I think the problem solving process that you offered today can really help with that, because it does ask you to take a step back, as you know, that knee-jerk reaction of mama bear that we want to rescue or help or show the way. But take a step back and think, and really think about how we're feeling as a parent and not just that mama bear instinct. This is a real interesting question. What are some non-threatening ways to talk about the roller coaster of we're friends, we're not friends, we're friends again, and what seems to be some of that emotional blackmail going on between kids in their friendships?
Yeah. Yeah. I really like the word roller coaster friends. And I think that's a really healthy way to point that out to your kids too. This can be challenging, but I think that non-threatening word is key. And back to that slide where I talked about how do you just sort of put out a open-ended question or a self-reflection kind of topic for your kids. So this could look like, you know, I've noticed that when you talk about blank, you seem to look really hurt and upset. Have you noticed that too? And just pointing it out there. Or, sometimes when I pick you up from blank's house, it seems like you're kind of down, or really irritable. Have you ever noticed that too? Or what kind of is happening there? I think also back to that idea of what the three prongs of healthy friendship can be, and just sort of normalizing for your kids that the adventure of, I think, finding an ending ideal healthy friendship, like it's not always going to have those three proponents right away, and there are friendships that I think can evolve and get there, or there are some friendships where it's been trial and error for such a long time now that it is okay to step back from a friendship. And I know kids might need a lot of coaching too, in what that could look like to take a step back from friends. That's not always natural.
Yeah. I noticed in the chat, somebody asked, what about when you think your kid is stirring the pot? So their contribution to the friend or social drama.
Oh, yeah. I love that a parent's even asking that, right? Sometimes, again, it's so much safer and easier to reflect on the other peers and friends, but it's so healthy to look at, again, your child's role or just their patterns, because that's how you can be most helpful. So I think starting with curiosity, and just remembering, like, if that's happening, that's not your fault as a parent per se, but curiosity could be like, w- where could this be coming from? Is this maybe learned behavior they're picking up from a friend group? Do I know, my child's been struggling in some other areas? You know, every kid kind of brings their own unique personality traits and features, to the plate. Maybe your child's already been pre-diagnosed with ADHD, and that's totally okay, right? And the impulsivity is going to be something they need coaching on, or right, anxiety too. They're already prone to that, and maybe it's not you have a bad kid who's trying to stir the pot. It's coming from a place of they're trying to figure out their internal world, and that's being navigated through friendships. But I do this falls under the stepping in category. If you get the sense your child is contributing, which they're going to, conflict is two-way streets, dramas, two-way streets, being able to kind of set limits, and whatever that would look like, if it's a lot of conflict that's happening on technology, right, or on social media, I do think that's appropriate for parents to say, we're going to have to set some limits about this, and making sure you have the conversation about why, why there's a new limit being set. And then I'm also a big supporter of helping your child understand, if they want more freedom in the future, how that would look. And that's the teachable moment, right? So, like, you know, I've just noticed, or, it's been brought up, or you even showed me just kind of how this is looking with friends in the future. I think, this is how it would need to look for me to be comfortable giving you more freedom, on TikTok or Snapchat or whatever it is.
If a parent suspects that the friend drama is happening at school, how should they be intervening? So do they work with the school, the teacher, other parents? And you spoke about this a little bit, but specifically in the school environment.
Yeah, love that. And again, I really think the first line of action shouldn't be reaching out to other families and parents, just again by accidental nature of making things more complicated. And I spoke about where there's exceptions, right? If you've known a family for a long time, or maybe it comes up just sort of organically when you see the parent, or family out somewhere at an extracurricular. Otherwise, I do think, yes, this starts by making sure you have an open connection with someone at the school, maybe no matter what their age is, right? So doesn't need to be constant communication with this person at school. We're trying to avoid the accidental hovering, right, and problem solving on behalf of your kids. But if you have that one teacher or case manager or resource teacher that is a lifeline, yeah, you can start by even just putting out there, again, here's what I've noticed, here's kind of what's been shared, maybe even asking them to keep it confidential, right? And just trust that they might be able to use that information to sort of navigate things in a unique way. I would say when I was at the school, actually, there were some parents who did a really nice job of just saying, like, I don't want to inflame this could be nothing, but I just kind of want to put it out there. I know you see these guys together all day long. And sometimes that was a dead end and it was okay because it had already been resolved. Or sometimes I knew right away what the parent was talking about, that it's sort of even been noticeable by teachers, right? Or there's a growing history or context. And then the school can kind of find a way non-threatening to intervene too.
Absolutely. As a former teacher, I would agree completely. I would want to know, so I can just have my eyes out and make sure both parties are taken care of and supported if needed. Also, as a teacher, stepping back in the same way we're asking parents to do so. Also, a parent asked, it would be helpful if you could speak about the dynamic, how the dynamics may be different between boys and girls.
Yes, I actually meant to bring this up on one of the slides and I forgot. So I like this question. And I do want to say it was sort of intentional not to focus too much on gender roles, just because I know, we're kind of figuring out that we don't want to impose these societal definitions on boys versus girls, right? Where just sort of historically, boys are socialized to be more independent and macho, right? And girls are socialized to be more sensitive and understanding. Like we're wanting to blur those lines as, new generations are coming up to give permission to be both and all. But this was actually fun for me to tap into the research on too. They actually found that there's more similarities than differences in how boys and girls, if we're using those two just gender roles, experience and aggress, I guess. So more similarities than differences, where yes, it's true that boys, I think, tend to engage in more physical forms of bullying, but they actually experience the same or similar levels about relational aggression, electronic cyber aggression, and verbally too. So I hope that helps.
Yes. All right. Maybe time for one more question. Boy, there are so many good ones. So we talked about reaching out to the school. Let's say a parent feels compelled to reach out to the other parent and quickly realizes they're either indifferent or take a more hands-off approach, or they just have a different philosophy or lens in seeing the situation. How do you suggest handling that?
Yeah, yes. And unfortunately, just need to remind everybody, yes, we can never control how other parents are going to respond or handle their parenting, and that's okay too. This is where that social problem solving model is hopefully helpful for parents too, right? So, like asking yourself, what's your goal? And then, therefore, what's going to be the most productive way to go about that goal. And if you've kind of gathered that information, even if you stepped a little bit forward, and did reach out to the parent, that's okay. That's where it is now, but if you're gathering this isn't going to be productive or maybe help me get the outcome I'm wanting, then I just need to switch gears. And that could look like being a little bit more direct in my own house with my child about boundaries that maybe need to be set, or reaching out to the teacher then. Also wanting to just remind parents, like, feel really confident in your values, right? About what you think is the right thing to do. It doesn't mean that the other parent's going to totally align with what you're saying or putting out there as your values, but you could just say, hey, I wanted to put this on your radar. Here's what's kind of come up. Here's what I'm going to try to talk to my kid about. Just wanted to let you know, and then it's not really needing a back and forth or anything of that nature.
Sure. Well, I have a bonus question. I said one more, but one more question. This comes from our live chat. When your child's best friend is a drama queen, what can your child do to navigate through that friendship without getting involved in her friend's drama?
Oh, yes, yes, yes. I like the idea of talking to your child about different ways they could be sort of like the end to the gossip train, and sort of what is mostly authentic to your child, how that could look. So if your child is witty, right, or more inclined to be able to use a good sense of humor, that's a really good way to sort of end the gossip in the moment. You can sort of role model and teach your kid how to just sort of pivot the conversation, right? If it needs to just happen more subtly, or again, if the whole spirit is conflict and being direct is okay and healthy, and we want to remind our kids of that, even teaching them, just a really direct, clear statement they can make to this friend just about like, hey, I'm not, really comfortable when, blah, blah, blah's name gets brought up in conversation. I've actually experienced them differently. Actually, they're in my gym class and, I think they're kind of nice. So just empowering your kid that, even though it can be scary at first to have a opposing opinion with their friend who is more inclined to be dramatic, if you will, that it doesn't mean that there's a reason to shy away from putting their own view out there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Kate, thank you so much. I know we've gone a minute over, but every second was worth it. I know I learned a lot during this time. I just really appreciate you walking us through as parents, problem solving for ourselves as well as our kids. And thank you so much for being a part of the community.
Thanks, guys.
Absolutely. And we do have another Lunch and Learn coming up in March. I believe we have that slide, and there it is. Our next Lunch and Learn is My Kid Okay? Early Signs of Mental Health Struggles on Tuesday, March 21st at 12 p.m. We hope to see you there. Thank you, Kate, and thank you all for coming this afternoon. Have a great rest of the day.